Welcome to the Revival Method podcast, where we teach you actionable steps that you can take to start moving, thinking, and feeling better. Hey, welcome back to the Revival Method podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Parker, and today's episode is me sharing a story from what I experienced over the last weekend that I feel like could be a light bulb moment for you who are listening. But before I get into that, I do have a couple things that I should announce because I do want as many people as possible to move and feel their best. Starting May 5th, we are doing our 21-day challenge. As I mentioned in previous podcasts, I felt like I was going to wait a little bit longer before hosting another one of these, but the positive feedback that I was getting was pretty much overwhelming. And it felt like I was doing my following a injustice if I didn't actually run one pretty soon here, because momentum was being built. And I didn't want to see it become extinguished just because they had lack of guidance. So we are doing it again. So if you want to be a part of this 21-day free challenge, all you simply have to do is be a part of my newsletter or my Facebook community, because that's where I'm going to be sending out the sign-up form. In this 21-day challenge, we're just going to be focusing on the foundations, meaning what is the bare minimum thing that the body needs to move and feel its best? Because once you set this foundation, everything that you want to do after that becomes easier and easier. So we're going to do that together. And the second thing that I'm going to announce is, hey, if you've been listening to this podcast and you've been getting any type of benefit from it, please take the 5 seconds that it would take to give this show a 5-star review. If you're listening to this on Spotify, go to the top right corner. It has 3 dots. Click on that and it'll say rate this show. Give us 5 stars and that would mean the world to me. If you're on Apple Podcasts, scroll to the bottom. You'll see the outline of 5 stars. Hit that 5-star review, leave a comment, because once again, this helps me get my message out to the many people that should be listening to this. So if you want to help me out, you want to take those 5 seconds, please do. But without further ado, let's get into the story that I want to tell you. So over the last weekend, I went to the middle of Florida. It's about northwest from where I live. It's called Peace River. Peace River is absolutely beautiful. We do it every year. It started off as just a family thing, but then we had a bunch of plus ones, and 4 years in, we have 23 plus people go on this river with us. And it's a 23-mile canoe trip. Some years we have a current that helps us. Other years, it's no current. And even sometimes we have to drag our heavy canoe along the way. And there's times where there's trees in the water and you have to awkwardly paddle or awkwardly drag your heavy canoe past the shallow ends until you get to a point where it floats again. And at this point in the story, I usually get some type of remark or comment said like, "Oh man, must be nice to be young." And I'm here to tell you that I wasn't just on this trip. It wasn't just my friends. But there was my mom on this trip, her boyfriend, her friends, my father-in-law, his friends. So when you're looking at the age range of the people on this trip, we had people as young as 28 all the way up to their 80s. And not a single person on this trip experienced any type of injuries. But let me paint a picture here. In this camping trip, not only are you carrying very heavy things, not only are they forcing you to be in awkward positions, because it's not like you can carry a cooler symmetrically. It's not like you can carry firewood, chop firewood in a way that's super safe, right? There is situations in this canoe trip that people would automatically deem to be dangerous and put them in a situation of pain and injury. But not a single person on this trip actually experienced one wink of an ache or a pain. And I feel like if we can go over the principles as to why we didn't experience these things, I think we can compare this laterally to other lifestyle activities and help you along the way. So what was rule number one? What was rule number one as to why, or principle number one as to why we didn't get injured? Well, we had a foundation of movement. And this is what we're going to be working on in the challenge. If we are able to access all of the ranges of motion that are musculoskeletal system should have access to, we're able to be in the most optimal position at that time to make sure that we're not going to be at a higher risk of injury. And this can be looked at in a couple different ways. So, of course, biomechanically speaking, there is one way that's the most efficient to complete a particular movement, right? But also, because you're doing the same movement over and over and over and over, you need the ability to find some variation in that exercise or that physical activity so you are spreading the stress. We're going to cover that a little bit later. So, we need a foundation of movement to make sure that we have the ability to do the activity that's asked of us, right? But then again, you also need strength within those ranges of motion to help ward off future injury. Because we know the more strength that you have, the less likely you're going to be injured. Okay. So, rule number one, you need the ability to move into all these various ranges of motion so you could be optimal, but you also need strength in these ranges of motion. So, what does this mean in practical sense? Because of course we're talking about camping, right? But this shows up everywhere. Let's say that you are, cleaning up the house and you're going through old boxes, and of course carrying a heavy old box, it's not going to be symmetrical. So you're going to probably be bent over, twist, and laterally bent in a way that is probably going to leave you at more risk of being injured. Well, if you have a foundation of strength and movement, you're less likely to be injured. Because if I were to ask you, hey, what's your maximal strength? And you say, well, I can lift 100 pounds, and this box is 10 pounds, chances are you're not going to be injured, right? So this is why I'm such a broken record when it comes to why you should be resistance training, because you're creating that buffer of strength, that protective strength that makes it less likely for you to be injured. So that's rule number one. Every person on this trip had enough strength to go to 23 miles, to pull the boat, to carry firewood, to do all the things that camping required. They had the ability to access those ranges of motion, but they also had the strength throughout those ranges of motion. So if you are finding yourself in a predicament where you're getting more aches and pains during your lifestyle activities, perhaps we need to restore some range of motion. Perhaps we need to strengthen certain ranges of motion so you're less likely to feel that. Okay. So, rule number two, what did we do across these 23 miles? We spreaded the stress. Okay. And I mean this in a couple of ways. Did we do 23 miles of canoeing in one day? God, no. No one would want to do that. That would be miserable. And of course, this is a vacation, so we wanted to take our time. So, of course, along the way of this trip, not only did we take breaks, but we also set up shop halfway through the canoe trip at a certain campsite. By taking on this large activity into bite-sized pieces, we allowed our body to recover so it can take on additional stress. So what does this mean in the real world, not in camping world? Well, if you found yourself in a predicament where you woke up the next day and you feel unbelievably sore, unbelievably achy, or perhaps a true injury, you might have done too much too soon. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be feeling this way forever. It just means that this is a learning situation where you know that in the future, you have to do a little bit less because you reached your ceiling. Okay. So we spreaded the stress across time. Okay. But we also spreaded the stress across biomechanics. So instead of just canoeing one way on, like, let's say the right side of the canoe, well, sometimes we canoed on the left side. Sometimes I was leaning forward. Sometimes I was leaning back. I mean, there was times where I was literally rowing backwards. Like we were going backwards in the canoe. I flipped it around because I wanted to start pushing the water instead of pulling it, because we're working a whole different set of muscles. But that allowed me to feel more fresh across my shoulders. And especially because when you're sleeping on the floor and camping, you're sleeping right on flat ground on those shoulders. So it tends to make you feel more achy. But by spreading the stress, biomechanically speaking, no one got hurt. No one felt unbelievably sore at the end of these 23 miles. So this skill of knowing how to manipulate your body in a way that kind of put stress across different areas allows you to not hit that breaking point. And that kind of comes back to the ability to have a foundation of movement, because if you don't have that ability to access a variety of movements, you're stuck in one movement pattern the entire time. So you want to spread the stress biomechanically speaking, right? And through time. So let's once again apply this to a real life scenario. You have plenty of people that are desk bound because their job requires that. Okay. What does that look like to start offloading the stress on their forearms and wrists? Because we know with high repetition jobs, carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, tendonitis of that sort is very common. Well, by changing your positions, whether it be from a seated to standing, perhaps instead of leaning to one side, you're leaning to another, perhaps bringing your desk higher or lower while you're still sitting, all these micro changes how the stress is being placed on your body. Therefore, when the stress is no longer being placed in the same area, it can actually recover and give you a little bit more gas in the gas tank to make it less likely for you to be injured. So instead of asking yourself, man, why am I in pain? And the prototypical answer is, oh, because I wasn't in perfect posture. No, you just experienced too much stress in a little amount of time. Your body couldn't keep up with the recovery. So instead of trying to stack your spine, keep your shoulders back, making sure that your wrists are at a 90-degree angle, figure out how you can vary your posture throughout the day so you can disperse the stress. That is going to pay much larger dividends than buying a $3,000 chair because ergonomics, right? So that was principle number 2. Principle number 3 is recover the best you can. So many people neglect this final rule principle that I'm talking about here, and then they are left in the situation of feeling super run down and super confused. It typically presents itself like, I don't get it. I'm exercising all the time. How am I not fit enough to do XYZ? Well, the chances are you are fit enough. You're just so run down and you didn't allow your body to keep up with the demand that you're placing on it, and it's just you're not at your best, simply put. If I were to ask you, how strong are you, how much weight can you lift, and you say 100 pounds is my best day, but then I put you through the ringer, deadlines, you haven't been sleeping, you're sick, you're just absolutely run down, what are the chances of you actually hitting those 100 pounds? Very low, right? Because when it comes to being our best, we need recovery, but also keep in mind that we only progress in our strength, in our stability, in our betterment of our body is in the recovery phase. Exercise is stress being placed in the body in an intelligent and controlled way. But without actually recovering from that stress, it's just stress. See what I'm saying here? So you have to make sure that you are recovering like it's your job. That is going to be the bottleneck to your success. 9 times out of 10, that's what's going on. As we age, our ability to recover goes down, and our ability to clear inflammation goes down. So we actually have to make sure that our quality of sleep is perfect, our nutrition is dialed in, our stress management is dialed in. I hope I'm painting a good picture here. So what does recover the best you can entail? So when it comes to nutrition, when we're canoeing, you are going to be primarily using carbohydrates as your source of energy, right? That's going to be your glucose that's stored in your muscles. So if you're somebody that has been avoiding carbohydrates because you were told that it is the reason why you are storing excess body fat, I'm here to tell you that is a myth, that is a lie, and you are now depriving your body of I would say, primary fuel source and a preferred fuel source of the body. Now, is it essential? Can your body make carbohydrates outside of eating them? Of course, but it's not efficient. Your body actually burns a lot of energy trying to convert other nutrients into carbohydrates as a preferred fuel source. Okay. But we made sure that we had our carbohydrates because we were canoeing 23 miles, right? We made sure that each one of our meals had a great amount of protein to repair and restore the muscles that we worked all throughout the day. And then, of course, we did have our fats. Proteins and fats have essential nutrients in them that without them we would essentially die. So we made sure that we had our fats because that's what produces our hormones, and also that is the source of our long duration energy. So if we're doing an activity for a very long period of time, our fats can be broken down and given to the body for energy, but it just takes a long time to do. And in the meantime, we're utilizing those carbohydrates to facilitate the energy that we need. Okay. I hope that all makes sense. So, yes, you're going to make sure that you're fueling your body properly. You're also going to make sure that if you feel run down, let's say your sleep has been compromised, you are highly stressed out, the activities and the stress that you're placing on your body must be modified, or you're going to be running the risk of higher injury risk, right? So if you are, like, objectively speaking, you haven't slept well in a week, you should not be going for a personal best in any physical activity. It just doesn't make sense and it's not necessary. Instead, you could be utilizing exercise as a way to buffer stress, in the sense of, like, when you go for a run, walk, or you kind of just lightly exercise, you do blow off some steam. Awesome. But you shouldn't be stressing your body out even more when you're already sleep deprived, right? That's like trying to get blood from a stone. So that's another way that we're safeguarding our recovery. So that is the big three that I wanted to point out here, and how if we are able to get 20 all the way up to 80-year-olds through a 23-mile canoe trip with no pain at all, no injury at all, by following these three principles, I think that we can take these principles, apply it to our everyday life, because our everyday life typically doesn't require that much physicality, right? And I hope this illuminated things for you. And I guess I can take a moment and recap here. So, how do we make injuries very hard how do we make it very hard for injuries to occur? You have step one: restore your movement. Have the ability to access all these different ranges of motion and then be strong in those ranges of motion. By doing that, you're already warding off a lot of injury. Then you're going to make sure that you're dispersing stress across the body and across time to make sure that we're not doing too much too soon. By doing that, your body's always going to get bite-sized pieces of stress and then recover from it and then get stronger and better. Okay. Then next, we're going to make sure that we're fueling our body properly. We're going to make sure that if we are doing something that requires a certain energy source or preferred energy source, we're feeding the body exactly what it needs. If we are breaking down our body's muscles, we need to fill our body with protein to make sure that we are sustaining that ability to build muscle, right? And then lastly, maximize your sleep, reduce as much stress on your body as possible. I hope this helps. Talk to you later.